content is for informational and educational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Nothing contained here constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer to buy or sell any securities or other financial instruments whatsoever by Draper Goren Blockchain, aka DGB, the presenter, or other associated parties for the content being provided. Please do your own due diligence and seek proper counsel.
Boom! Welcome. Another week. It was really funny. I actually was trying to retweet the thing as it was popping up on my phone, and David Blesnak, our partner, called, and I accidentally picked up the phone instead of declining him, and then I was like, trying to fumble with my phone as we were coming live. Welcome, Yitsy. First time here. I'm excited to have you. Really quickly though, before we jump in, I always forget to do this. I want to remind people that if you want to get on our newsletter, or oops, I put this in the background instead of the foreground. Hold on, here we go. If you want to follow us at DGB Ventures, go to dgb.vc, Draper Goren Blockchain. We invest in early stage blockchain startups. If you have an idea, we want to be the first check in. So tell us first, come hang out with us. If you are watching live, feel free to chat, tell us where you're joining from, feel free to ask questions and join us. And what else did I want to say? If you're not watching live, follow us everywhere so you can watch live next time. We do this every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, but there may be a week or two randomly where we change the date for travel purposes or things like that, but we'll let you know in advance most of the time. Yitsy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great pleasure.
So yesterday I recorded Yitsy's podcast that he does, and it'll be, I think, posted next week. And as we were hanging up, I was like, hey, you need to do our podcast one day and hang out with us. And we figured out that the schedules aligned, and we just came on today. Yitsy is cool because he's not only a lawyer that understands our space. He has a firm called DLT Law, where he practices, but he's also cool because he's participated in the space, engaged a little bit. You may have seen him in the past. I think he changed his PFP at this point, but he does have. He bought we discussed a little bit yesterday, but we were talking about IP rights on NFTs, and there was a guy who took his ape and gave people the right to use some derivatives of his ape by minting a certain amount. And Yitsy got one of them and put a suit on it, and that was his PFP for a while. So he's got the ape lawyer suit guy. He's that guy. So but Yitsy, you're joining us from Israel, right?
I'm joining you from Israel. I like to use the 8 PFP because I think it really says like lawyer degen. I actually have a domain, lawyer degen XYZ, because I feel like in this industry, like it's not. I'll tell you, the first crypto conference I went to, I was like right after I left the big law firm that I was working at, and it was in Miami. It was Miami NFT week. And I showed up. I was going up to speak on stage, and I was speaking on the second day of the conference. First day, I showed up, and I was there with a bunch of clients, and I was wearing like my lawyer clothes, like my like fancy pants and fancy shoes. And the client that I was with said to me, "Is like, dude, you can't go up on stage like this. This is a crypto conference. Like, you need to dress in degen mode." So he took me shopping, bought me a pair of like ripped Zara jeans and Jordan 1s. And then I came home at the end of the week, and my wife like didn't recognize me anymore. She's like, what's the deal? I also got an iPhone. I was like an Android guy previously. She's like,
oh man,
what happened to you? You went to Miami
really
for a week, you came back like a real degen. And that was it. That was like my inauguration into the crypto legal sphere. and I never looked back. I got myself a lawyer ape that I popped in my business card, and whenever I give my business card to like non-crypto folks, they're like, "What the hell is this? You have an ape on your business card?" But it's like like if you know, you know
is
kind
it
of
your
thing.
only business card? Do you have separate ones for separate situations?
I really should.
No, I
Unfortunately, it's
like
my
that
own.
if it's your only one. I like that. It's like
Yeah, it's you know what? I feel like it's a good educational thing also, because like for
then you
the
get to talk about IP and some innovations and NFTs and
ice a little bit.
So do you own the ape, the original ape,
I
or the?
own no, I own the derivative.
Okay.
And the funny thing is that like the guy who minted the initial versions of his ape
Okay.
is like a Ryder Rips supporter who, you know, I thought he was doing it because he was being like really cool with IP rights. Really, he was doing it to show why, you know, NFTs can be copied, etc. You know, he was doing it for political reasons, whereas I was looking at it more from a legal standpoint. But it's
And
still fun.
is he retaining his ape, right? Because that becomes an interesting issue. That if he minted a derivative of his ape and then gives you rights to use it, those rights are only as good as long
No,
as
no, those rights don't exist. But he had an original ape. There's still questions of like he gave me a license to use derivatives of his ape. But then he sold his ape. So
So
do those rights transition? That's the question. I would I would say no.
yeah,
I mean they certainly wouldn't transition. Like he gave non-commercial use rights in copies of the original,
yeah,
and commercial use rights in the derivatives. So I would argue that the derivatives I do retain the rights to, but that I have no commercial or non-commercial right to use copies of his. And this is not a legal
yeah, no, for sure, no.
show, so I don't want to like get too deep into the legalese. It's probably gonna be really boring for
Well,
whoever's
you and
watching
I
this.
might enjoy this topic because, like, I totally do like enjoying this topic and having these discussions because like this is still trying to be figured out, right? I mean, I got over like 1,000 NFTs. I've got a Bored Ape. I've got other stuff. I just bought a cool cat like a couple weeks ago, and so like
I love that people are still buying NFTs. Like,
well, I'm probably the only one. No, actually, I had a buddy buy a doodle about a week ago too. So some people are still buying blue chips at least.
I still like religiously, like at least once a week, go into OpenSea just to see what the floor is on some of like the projects that I
Right.
either held in or still hold in. But like I don't actually believe that there's anybody else in the world who's doing that. I just kind of assume that for the
I'm doing
most
that.
part they're
I'm
dead.
there with you. I'm there
There's
with you.
Okay, good. So we can make this into like a support group for
Yes.
people who are still bullish on NFTs.
Yeah.
that maybe that's the name. You know what? This might we always joke that we
Still
need
bullish.
to rename this show and not
And
call
it's
it the
okay, man.
DGB show. Maybe we just call it Blockchain Support Group.
No. Still bullish. I think
Still-
still bullish is a good one.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's still bullish. That's not a bad one.
dude, I think that could be it. I mean, we can steal the OG Lunar Crush logo. I don't have any of my stuff in front of me right now, but I have the OG Lunar Crush logo that says bullish. And we could use
It's a
that.
good hashtag. Still
That's
bullish.
right. Still bullish. Always.
Still bullish though.
If you're not now, you never were.
I want a
and,
t-shirt. I want a still bullish DGB t-shirt.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
that would be cool. There was this thing with hardcore bands when I was growing up. I find a way to always bring it back to some kind of punk rock thing. And there's a certain group of hardcore bands and people who are straight edge, and they would put X's on their hands, and they would symbolize, like, the X started when, if you were a minor, you wouldn't get a wristband for alcohol at a show, and they'd put an X on your hand to just kind of show you paid, but you can't drink alcohol. And the people who purposely didn't want to drink alcohol, who were straight edge, who were anti doing drugs and stuff like that, would draw X's on their hands. Some of them would get tattoos of the X's on their hands. And it was like a thing, like straight edge. And I remember one dude one time had a shirt on. It was like some straight edge shirt, and it said, "If you're not now, you never were." And I thought, like, for some reason that slogan stuck in my head, and now I use it all the time when I talk about, you know, crypto stuff and whatever. And people are like, "I used to own an ape," or "I used to be a part of this community," and I go, "If you're not now, you never were." You know, it'd be real dramatic.
I love it.
I like
love
that.
it. That's great.
Which,
So in Israel, you could legally drink from the age of like 13. So nobody needed any X's ever.
That's right. I went, so one time, so I would go visit family in Israel when I was a kid, because my mom was a teacher. I couldn't stay home all summer. I either would have to go with my dad to work, or I'd go with my mom to Israel. And of course, I wanted to go hang out with my grandparents and my cousins and have fun in Israel. One time I was probably 18 years old or so. So this is one of the later times. Maybe I was 17 years old. One of my cousin's best friends, who was good friends with me too, was coming to Israel on a birthright trip. Birthright trips are like those free trips that
For heritage purposes.
They're like heritage purposes. A lot of kids go on these trips, teenagers to go. They have fun. You know, boys and girls hang out with each other, go tour and learn about, you know, all of the things you can learn about the history and religious stuff. And my friend Mikey went on one of these trips, and he told the trip, he signed up in advance, and his parents helped him fill out a form that if you had family in Israel, there was one weekend where you were allowed to leave the trip to hang out with the family, as long as, you know, signed a legal guardian in Israel to pick you up and drop you off. And they figured it out, and they had my aunt sign that form for him. And so my aunt picked him up, and we got to hang out in Israel. And we somehow, me and him, probably my other cousin too, we ended up in Tel Aviv at one of those restaurant bars that are on the sand of the beach. So in America, in the United States, California, there's no like restaurant where you just sit in a chair on the sand of the beach and they come and serve you. So I remember I like ordered like watermelon and French fries or something. And the lady said, "You want something to drink?" And he looked at her, he's like alcohol? And she's like, "Whatever you want." And I like ordered a Coke or something. Like, I don't think I ordered a beer. At that point, I would have never ordered anything. I was like probably 17. He's a year younger than me, 16. He asked for a martini, and he asked for it shaken, not stirred. And it was the funniest thing in the world. Like the lady just like
and she brought it to him.
Just looked at him like what a nerd. And it was so funny. I'm sure he didn't drink it at all, because, you know, even as an adult, a martini is not very good, in my opinion, at least. So a 16-year-old drinking like straight vodka, like, it's pretty gross. It was really funny, but it also just showed the difference. Like in the US, you turn a certain age, your friends start drinking, you have to like hide in parking lots or go to a friend's house or find a person that will let you do it, right? In Israel, there never really was that like weird, like, oh, we got to hide to drink, because you're allowed to. So it wasn't as big of a deal.
Yeah, and then you have these like random Americans who come here touring, and then they just get pissed drunk every night and like can't hold their alcohol. And it's like, those guys, what are they doing here? Good times.
Yeah. So okay. So if we're on the topic of Israel for a second, you're based in Israel. Israel is known for being, you know, like what did they call it? Like
startup nation.
Startup Nation. Yeah, there's a book called Startup Nation. There's a big conference that the Our Crowd people do for Israeli tech that brings a lot of people. I know about it because of the crowdfunding world and days. But you know, I know there's a hardcore tech scene in Israel. How big is the blockchain tech scene in Israel? Is there tons of companies? How are the events there?
It's enormous, actually. Somebody just told me recently, and you know, this isn't verified, but there's actually like a crypto-centric VC here in Israel called Collider VC, and they put out like an ecosystem map just showing like all the Israeli companies that are somehow associated with crypto. Somebody told me something like, and again, I can't prove it, but that like 80% of blockchain companies are Israeli, which is an insane amount. I can't back it up.
There needs to be more.
But I would tell you that, like,
you have to imagine it's either Israeli or Cayman Islands.
No,
right? So I would tell you that, like, like we started, so I for about 8-9 years worked at the 3 out of the top 5 law firms here in Israel. In 2016, always, always in tech related departments, but in 2016 started doing a lot of crypto work, and we were doing like tens of ICOs a month, including like Celsius's ICO, represented them straight up to the crash almost, and many others that I'm not proud of having worked with. But there's definitely.
I have a story, but I'm not gonna go into it. I told you about it maybe yesterday, but I see a lot of crypto firms and have lawyers who are experts and not take the legal advice of the lawyers most of the time, or find some middle ground and push forward, right? What's that percentage like for you? Do you take what they tell you and try to fit it to make sense, or do you say, hey, you have to do it this way, and then they do what they want, kind of thing? Like what's like the process? I was going to get into some questions, but this is interesting now that we're saying this out loud, right?
So I'll tell you, it really depends on the client. Okay.
Yeah.
There are certain clients. I always start by telling clients, like, if you're deciding to operate somewhere in the crypto sphere, there's no such thing as no risk. Okay.
Yeah.
So like by default, entering into this ecosystem, doesn't matter how risk adverse you are, there is going to be some level of risk. And based on what your risk appetite is, we will help you mitigate that to the greatest extent possible. A lot of times we're showing you what the risk is, and based on your risk appetite, you're determining where you want to be on that sphere. But we don't make decisions for clients. We just kind of like tell it like it is, okay? And depending on what the client decides, we could help be wherever you want to be on that risk scale.
Yeah.
And we have clients on both sides, okay? There are those that hear our advice, and then they say, thank you so much for your input, I really appreciate it, and then they go and do completely the opposite, and that's fine, because I still think that we're able to bring value in just putting the risk out there, so he knows when he's making the decision that it's on him, but he knows also what the implications are.
Yeah.
And then there are others that want to invest heavily in obtaining licenses, and in securing legal opinions, and in blocking U.S. consumers, because everybody who's anybody who wants to build a product in this space, in DeFi space or token sales, is almost definitely going to need to block aggressively American consumers from various other jurisdictions for AML reasons. And they'll end up spending lots and lots and lots of money and listen to everything we say and more, and constantly be saying, and what else can I do, and what else can I do, because they're scared shitless that one day the SEC or somebody else is going to come knocking on their door. So it really depends on the client. We're just there to tell it like it is.
What I've learned being a part of this industry long enough is that there are a lot of people believe I can find a jurisdiction where what I want to do is legal, and then I will incorporate there and I will do it there. But what they don't kind of realize is, if you are not physically there as well, it doesn't really count, right? Like if you're an American and you say, well, there's a better jurisdiction in this other place, I'm going to do it there, but I'm pushing the button from California. I'm in California full time. I never even go to that other place. The US looks at that and goes, you're still not, you're still
so that's not 100% clear cut.
You cut out.
There's probably ways, as long as you have an employee there that's actually.
Yeah, it really depends on what you're doing, and if you're in a regulated environment, or you use terms that are I'm going to remove him from the screen, but I'll see when he comes back on the thing here. He was a sport because I accidentally told him I said Twitter Space yesterday, and so he thought it was going to be voice, and so he pulled over on the side of the road. I think he used his phone as a hotspot, and he's doing the
battery died or something like that.
So he's awesome. We appreciate that. So he'll probably be back. And so, there's I think where I was going to go next with that was ask him about, the regulatory environment in Israel versus United States and other places. Because I think Israel is probably somewhere in the middle, like probably better than the US, but probably is pretty similar. They tend to be like almost exact copies.
It makes me really wonder on the US on how long are they going to try to preserve the existing system, right? When we see Israel, if they really do have 80% of the market.
I don't think no, I think there has to be another caveat to that stat, because if you think about that, right, they can be significant, right?
Yeah.
But think about every company in India, every company in Europe, every company in Singapore, and every company in Switzerland, every company here. It doesn't make sense that they're 80%, but 80% could mean some certain value or something. Because there was, early days. What was the one? There was one of the first ICOs that were successful was an Israeli company.
In crypto that might make sense though, just because like people don't want to do a crypto company in the US, which is realistically going to hurt the US long term, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure.
And so politicians need to wake up. We need to get these people who are 80 years old in politics who can't probably use half the internet. Kind of how new people in to adopt the new technology, so we can continue growing around with the rest of the global planet.
It's very transparent, right? But the good news, I think, is when groups like BlackRock and groups like that are making historical amounts of money on Bitcoin, right? They're all of a sudden, I think the politicians are going to become more flexible, and it's so transparent.
Not until they're in it, though. I think they're going to wait. Well, the thing is, the hard part is they don't believe in it, so they haven't been buying it or investing in it, and they're not going to allow it to go through unless they can actually make money on it. Also, I think. Right. And the thing is, they're still being told by their financial advisor that Bitcoin's a scam and it's a Ponzi scheme. And so they're going to be resistant. And it's hard to change that after you've been telling a narrative for 10 years that this is a Ponzi, to then go about and do a 360 and go the other direction and be like, oh yeah, I should buy this.
Yeah. They don't even have to say you can buy this, but they can start being more relaxed in that, like, it's really crazy, like when it comes to combating inflation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, one, the politicians love to say out loud that they like successfully beat inflation and it never happened and stuff like that, which doesn't make any sense when literally
they have for their own portfolios they have.
Maybe, but they they talk about, like, they go like, it's not inflation that's making groceries like a luxury good. Those grocers who are too greedy, right? Like maybe there's a portion of that, but there's obviously inflation.
So I don't know if my shirt right.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that moment when someone in politics finally admits that we've been practicing currency dollar debasement for the last 40 years. And this is the reason why we actually have inflation. And when
you're only going to get maybe like, there's only going to be a couple people that might say it. But the thing is, and when that happens, it's not going to be satisfying. Somebody finally admits something. It's like, still doesn't change anything.
Well, the scary part is you start with that. You're like, okay, currency inflation is currency dollar debasement. And then the next thing it goes into, well, then that means like taxation on appreciation. Like the next, you start linking into other conclusions.
Okay, but where I was going to go with bringing up inflation, where you don't have to go down the rabbit hole, is, one thing that makes inflation felt much, much harder is when there's a high level of unemployment, because not only is there inflation, but then you are really, really screwed, right?
Yep.
And what better way to help our economy by creating jobs in the sectors that create the most jobs, which is startups and small businesses. And if one huge category of startups, one of the biggest, that's growing right now, has to create every single job outside of this country, because the US is against it. If you want to be if you want to be a nationalist, right? You want to be an all proud American, whatever, you're actually going to all the other countries that you're talking trash about, and you're giving them more power. Yeah. It's kind of insane, right?
No, maybe that's intentional. At this point, we've been trying to sink a ship, it seems like. But it would be good. They need to at least provide some format of structure that people can then follow. That's not arduous, and a pain in the butt. And then I think people want to comply. People want to find a way to comply within reasonable means.
Of course, because your home is your home, and you want to stay there, right? Like, I don't think there's many people who, usually when people grow up, there's a certain person that wants to get out, right? And then there's most people who stick close to home and raise their families there and do their thing. They want to stay home. People want to create jobs in America, but they're calling us up from Singapore or these other places. It's pretty crazy. What up, Kevin? Had a cool hangout session with Kevin yesterday and learned a little more about some upcoming things on Tezos and Etherlink, which is the Tezos layer 2 that's EVM compatible, that's coming out. That's going to be fun to learn about. So I think we should actually have a Kevin and some of the Tezos crew, some of the Tezos community come and educate us on Etherlink and what's happening there. I think there's already testnet up and stuff like that. Kevin, let's plan something like that. It would be super fun. You sent something in our team chat about some Tezos transaction, and he could talk about Blue Harbor, what he's
I did. I did some Tezos transactions, and then I went to the portfolio to see what I did, and it's not showing up.
Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it together offline. It'll be a fun experiment.
So I don't know. It's funny because I also used Solana over the last week, and too much network congestion, and my transaction never went through. I think I attempted it 2 or 3 times. Now it'll probably fail because I don't have enough funds to do what I wanted to do 2 or 3 times. I'll be curious to see if it actually ever goes through. This whole thing of not being able to, I'm actually appreciating the fact that when gas gets more expensive on Ethereum, that you can actually pay more to get your transaction done, because it's a voting system, right?
Yeah.
If you want to do a transaction and you want to get it through really bad, you can pay more to get it done. Well, they don't have that on Solana. And so you're at the mercy of the network, and you either get your transaction through or not.
It reminds me of like experimenting in 2017. It's crazy that Solana could be so big and it's still such a pain in the butt for someone like you who literally uses this stuff every day. You're not like a brand new person.
No, I've been doing it for a long time now. But what was funny is I was looking at a chart, and I showed this in one of my groups last night, that they, ETH money from ETH flew over to Solana, and now it's actually going back over to Base.
Back to an EVM. So
yeah,
but that's also part of the hype cycle, right? And if you're on Twitter, I didn't do any of the Solana stuff, but I do want to play around more on Base, because I played around very early on Base and there wasn't a lot there. Now there is, but it just shows that there is a certain group of degens that will just go to wherever the money is at the moment, but they're fleeting, right? They're not going to stay there. It's one of the things that I love about Tezos is there's an actual hardcore group of people who built one of the best products in the world, and they haven't followed all the hype and stuff like that. I think there is some problems with that, in the long term too, that go along with that. Oh, here's Yitsy is back. Cool. We'll get back into legal talk instead of our rabbit hole of
sorry about that.
everything else.
Oh, good.
Welcome back. Here, let's see what Kevin just had to say. I haven't read this yet, so we'll read it together. High marketing budgets can make inferior technologies temporarily popular, but Solana is clearly not scalable because even at this puny amount of users we have in crypto overall, it breaks. Yeah, that's true. But let's see if they can, technology fails as it scales very regularly, and people are there to fix it, right? One of the beautiful things about Tezos is that it's on chain and constantly upgrades and gets better and better and better. And the participants actually argue and debate parts of the network upgrades, and then, things change between each update and stuff like that. It's really,
I will say, Tezos has been a good experience so far. I think it's more the DApp issue that I was dealing with than Tezos itself.
We'll play around together and see. But at the end of the day, if there aren't tons and tons of users, it's hard to say, hey, when we drop our next the NFT family project we're thinking about, should we do it on Tezos? I would love to, but if all of the people we're promoting it to don't have Tezos wallets and things like that, it's going to be hard to make happen, right? And one of the beautiful things though about the Etherlink EVM stuff is now all of those GitHub repositories of all the different EVM platforms and projects and things like that could potentially be.
Well, that brings a question of risk on Bitcoin. Risk has EVM, I think, support on Bitcoin, and the thing is it still hasn't seen a whole bunch of traffic come over, right? Yeah. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
We'll see. I mean, that's the thing is just because EVM doesn't mean also there's going to be a lot of traffic. There's just different opportunities that exist. I think if you're going to build something like an enterprise product, it would be crazy not to consider something like Tezos as your top choice, right? But if you're building something consumer, you have other factors to contend with, like where the consumers are, right? It's like every time I argue with my nephew about building something for crypto, he goes, but everyone's on Roblox. Right? It doesn't matter that there's better products out there to him. He can build it all day long, but he'll never make a cent, right? Everyone's on Roblox. It's why Apple got away with the way they charging developers and being predatory for the longest time, because that's where the users were. Go develop for Android, go develop for a Windows phone. You'll get 1/100th of the users who can afford to pay you. So there you go. Let's get back to
real quick. I should correct that. It's not Risk, it's RSK, but Rootstock is what I was talking about on Bitcoin.
Oh, okay, yeah. RSK.
Yitsy, are you doing were you doing in the DeFi space also, or are you just NFTs?
No. Anything crypto related.
Nice.
DeFi, NFTs were a fun little period. What's that?
I was gonna say, pre-blockchain and crypto, you were doing a lot of fintech stuff, right?
Just tech generally. Traditionally, came from the M&A and capital market space in Israel. We were mostly on the company side, being acquired by either U.S. companies or private equity firms. So just working with like 2-3 guys who started something in a garage and raised a bunch of money and hired a bunch of people and opened up satellite offices all around the world, and then at some point got acquired. So it's always been my favorite thing, watching an idea materialize into a company, materialize into like a large corporation, and then ultimately be sold and then go through various growth cycles as a company.
That's awesome. That's our favorite spot, is being early and being along for the ride and participating along the way, right? That's what we do. But to cap what we were finishing before, when things cut out, we were talking about regulatory environments and stuff like that. Before I ask you some questions, or we'll just see where the conversation goes. I was wondering, compared to the U.S., compared to the rest of the world, where does Israel sit as like a jurisdiction for launching, a DeFi product or something in crypto? Regulation wise, are they more favorable? Are they about the same?
Israel is a horrible place to incorporate a crypto company, for several reasons. Number one, we have a whole bunch of different regulators here who all have a different interpretation. I mean, I guess similar to the SEC and the CFTC, where they can't, decide if something's a security or commodity. But here we have the anti-money laundering authority, we have the tax authority, we have the securities authority, which is similar to the SEC, and then we have the overseer of the banks, and each of them have their own, their own personal interests in how crypto should or shouldn't be defined or taxed or whatever, and they are at odds with one another as to how regulation should look, and they each have their own laws and rules that are sometimes contradictory, and so very, very different. The second, probably the most challenging issue is the banks here. The banks here are so risk averse that if you even mention the word crypto in their presence, they will just shut down all of your accounts and won't work with you. And it's horrible. So you may ask, like, what are a bunch of Israeli lawyers doing in the crypto space? So, and I would tell you that we are, by no means Israeli lawyers in our outlook on things. We advise clients from all over the world, and even our Israeli clientele that we advise, we don't do very much Israel law-related work. In the crypto sphere, you develop a product that's presumably decentralized and is made available to users from all over the globe, and so you're susceptible to multiple regulatory frameworks that you need to comply with. And so we kind of provide like a broad umbrella of regulatory compliance and legal work. And the first thing that we do is just kind of like look at your product that you're developing, look at your founding team, look at where your users are, and we focus on trying to build the structure that makes the most sense from a regulatory and tax perspective. So it doesn't really matter like where you are. I would say that we would probably be the best team to start with, just to help you kind of brainstorm on what your structure needs to look like. And then we're all three of us partners are Israeli, but we have we call them global partners. They're not like partners, so to speak, in our firm, but we work very, very closely with them in every jurisdiction, and it's like a seamless process. Like, you don't need to engage with 7 or 8 different law firms. You engage with us, and you get like the full scope of legal services in whatever jurisdiction is most appropriate for you.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. By the way, I showed this while you were thinking. You looked away from the screen, so I don't know if you saw it, but Pravi, our buddy, just shared this, and I thought it was funny. You probably your whole life have had versions of this joke like 18,000 times.
Absolutely. It's my family WhatsApp group is called Hammer Time. And at my bar mitzvah, they did the din, 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 dance.
Did everybody get those baggy pants? You should do like a family photo one day with everybody wearing those baggy pants. It'll be only like 20 years too late, right? It'll be pretty funny.
Fashions come back and circle around.
That's right. So Yitsy, when a company comes to you, obviously they're coming to you because they're in our space. They're going to a firm called DLT Law, right? What's the most common, I'm trying to think of things for early stage companies something I said actually yesterday on your thing, and maybe I should have started with this in the first 5 minutes, is that what I've learned in crypto and in blockchain and startups in general is every time people try to make shortcuts when it comes to legal issues, they end up costing themselves way more money or hardships or problems in the future. And everybody says this, right? From the incorporating to your partnership agreements and things like that. But it should be said that lawyers, even the really expensive ones, and I don't know how expensive Yitsy is or if how he compares to others, it doesn't matter. Lawyers that know their space and know the category and are good are worth their weight in gold, because you will spend less time with them and they will avoid future legal problems if it's right. And by the way, the price doesn't always correlate to the quality. I've had really large firms that tried to keep the cost down, so they were really fast with me and I thought they were awesome, but they also weren't paying attention. And I had problems because they missed things, right? And then I've had firms who were very expensive or somewhere in the middle who paid attention to what I needed and were experts. And in the moment I went, wow, that's, a lot to deal with, a big legal bill, whatever, at an early stage company, but they saved me long-term so much. And I've seen it from the standpoint of watching companies do the wrong thing many, many, many times. I can only give advice, right? And hope they take it. So, I want to ask a couple questions related to saving people some grief, right? So when it does come to companies in our space, specifically, or crypto companies, blockchain companies, what's the sort of most common misconception, or what's sort of like the first order of business for you when you get brought on? Is at least the most common first order of business when most people come and call you up?
Yes, I'd say that there are like three main things to think about. We get a lot of, even still now, I know it's kind of like fallen out of fashion over the last few years, but it's kind of coming back with the bull market. We get a lot of companies, projects, whatever you want to call them, that start off by doing a token raise.
Right.
And so if you're doing a private sale, if you're doing a public sale, there are a lot of things to think about, mainly from like the securities laws perspective, but also with obvious tax implications. So like the first and most important thing would be, where and how do you incorporate? If there's a DAO in the picture, whether not you want to establish a foundation, and if you're going to have like a service provider that's affiliated, that and if you're going to appoint local advisors like you were talking about before to establish more of a presence offshore. So the actual like corporate structure is probably the first and most important thing that companies need to think about, even if you're not issuing a token. Because the second most important thing is probably IP, intellectual property. People don't really understand what intellectual property is. They typically think that it's like either just like a registered patent or a trademark, where really IP is if your 3-year-old son like sat at home with a bunch of crayons and drew a picture of you and your wife holding hands, like that's IP. That's his art that he created, and he has inherent rights in that. And theoretically, if he was going to assign that over to a different company, if there was any kind of value attributed to that picture that he drew, that might be a tax event. So regardless of like the securities laws aspects, there's issues of like IP transfer. So really thinking about how you want to structure your how you want to set up your corporate structure is like narrative from day one, but especially in this industry, because so often people decide that they don't want to be in a certain jurisdiction, or they want to specifically be in another jurisdiction where there is regulation or where there isn't regulation. And then when you're shuffling things around, it becomes much harder to move around IP and personnel and establish presences once you've already like had traction in one place. So I would
So
say
you
that's like really the most common, and also like the most expensive, because it's so time consuming. Like people always ask, oh, where do you open up companies? Like I don't open up companies in one place. And like I sometimes meet people and they're like, oh, we open up companies in El Salvador. Like, okay, that's lovely. Like it's really cute that El Salvador does like, is like affiliated with Bitcoin, but like there's no one answer for everybody. Like the answer of where do you open up companies is really based on when you're opening up the company, who you're opening the company for, what the company's supposed to do. So like it really is like an in-depth discussion that needs to occur together with the team. And that's like where I'd say like the core services, at least at all the regular commercial work. So like drafting staffs and terms of use and any other kind of agreements with service providers, and also like in this industry where communities become such a big part of everything, community engagement needs to also be something that has that goes, and it's unfortunate that we're in a point where we're in a place where like legal has to go through everything, but I really think that like announcements to community and communications community through roadmaps and white papers are super important to go through legal, because you see you see the value of community, but also in the sense that like a community can tank a project if it goes rogue, and usually it goes rogue because there wasn't consistent communication. You said you're going to do X and you ended up doing Y. So
well, and so many of these communities don't have legal, right? I mean, like there was a community that I was looking at, and they had this IP, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we voted that that it was going to be a Creative Commons, and that everybody would have their ownership of their IP, And I'm like, you can't vote on giving up somebody's copyright to their art that they created. Like you can't vote on that. I'm sorry, the person has to sign that copyright.
It's more than that. Like, and sometimes like the guys who started the project, they didn't even make the art. They contracted somebody on Fiverr who did it for them, and they don't even have an agreement with that guy. So it's not even their IP to begin with. So IP and corporate structure are the two most important things. And then I love the like joining a Discord, like back in the day when I was like aping into like random Solana NFTs or whatever. I remember like there were a few NFT projects that I bought into, and they're like, and then I joined the Discord, and they're like, "Welcome to the DAO." I'm like, "Whoa! When did we decide that we were entering into like a binding legal agreement with one another?"
It is funny, it's not just that, like from a perspective of like, so I used to build crowdfunding platforms, and when we first started, we couldn't actually build the platforms we wanted because not even regulation crowdfunding that exists in the United States now was in existence yet, right? So this was way early. Public solicitation of all forms are basically illegal unless you're like a public company, you do certain things, whatever. And what's interesting is that some groups will go through the process of hiring the lawyers to do the right thing, to say, we're doing a crowd sale, we're doing our raise in a certain way, whatever. But then the founder doesn't realize that posting about it on Twitter can be illegal, right? Depending on how you do it. Or, even worse is, not worse, it's just another version of it is they have a team and they have people that work for them. And then they might know better to not go on stage and say this token's going to moon or something like that, which would be a really stupid thing to do if you're launching a token. But their social media person is just like, how do if you're a teenager or a young person in your career, you don't know that these securities laws exist or what they are, but you get a job getting paid $10 an hour to be the social media person for a group, and you just post all sorts of things that are very, very not compliant, right? And I've had lots of situations where companies go, "Oh, whoops, my employee posted that." Either that was like their excuse for they screwed up, or their employee really did. But I think there is, there is a lot of stuff where there's examples in our space where people understood the law and the assignment, and then people who didn't, right? Like a couple examples I like to use on a really big scale, because they were in the scale of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, is like comparing the EOS Block 1 stuff to like the Telegram token thing. What was that token called? Ton or something like that?
Ton,
yeah. So if everyone remembers, EOS and Block 1 and all those people were like the biggest crowd sale in history, probably to this day, maybe even. And they always across the board, their leadership was smart enough to say, this token is worthless. they would say out loud at conferences, this token is worthless. This token has zero value. They would say these things out loud, even though people were trading it and doing it. And they're like, this token exists only for, compute power on the chain and whatever. This token is worthless. And they would say it over and over and over again. They raised billions of dollars. And at the end of the day, when the SEC came after them or whatever, they were fined a lot of money, tens of millions or even like hundreds of millions of dollars. They paid the fine and it was over. The Telegram dude would go on stage at conferences and be like, our token is going to moon. Like he would straight up say, buy the token. It's going to be worth so much money. And you know what happened when the SEC went after him? They paid the fines and they had to return everybody's money back and they killed the project, right? So that's the difference between whether the EOS Block 1 people thought the token was going to go up in value and whether they behind the scenes did whatever they did behind the scenes. They understood the rules and laws well enough and were disciplined enough to say the right things publicly and out loud. And I know that sounds stupid, like who cares? And really, who does care? But those are the jurisdictions and rules and laws that we live amongst, right? Whether we agree or not. And that's the issue of when you have the right lawyer and you actually take them seriously and you follow the rules. There's a big difference between a slap on the wrist and being put out of business. And then there's all sorts of gray areas and things in between that can mean, jail time. But that usually includes straight up fraud. And if you're, defrauding people, then you're an asshole and you're not paying attention to what anyone says or cares, right? So that's just not okay. So we only have a few minutes left. Rankin, you got any legal style questions or go down this rabbit hole with Yitsy before we
I don't know. I know. I was thinking, there was a crypto NFT project that I thought was very respectable, and they tried to make a game and launch something, right? And they realized that they failed at what they were doing. And so they took whatever remaining funds they had and actually distributed it to the NFT holders. And I thought that's probably about as fair as you get in a system. But there are so many rug projects where they had a roadmap. They sold an NFT to fund their roadmap, which is absolutely a security if you were a group of people. And I'm really curious to see what happens on some of those. I'm hoping for some rebates back or something. Some refunds. So we'll see. I don't know. The space is still evolving.
The problem, I think, is that the U.S. law says that you're supposed to get your dollars back. So if they held their funds in like ETH and ETH goes up and then they're forced to return people's money, people will have to choose, do I keep this token or do I get the US dollar value back? The problem with the ICOs and the timing of everything, a lot of the folks that were forced to return the money back, the value of the money because they held it in ETH went down so significantly that they couldn't even return people's money. So instantly puts them out of business and puts them into like bankruptcy and all that fun stuff. So it'll depend on how good they were at treasury management and if numbers went up in the meantime, right? If they ever get in trouble for it or what it is.
What's sad is it seems they only go after like the good ones, like the stoner cats. They've been going after the stoner cats, which I watched the episodes. They were great. I like the NFT. And that's like, but it's a project that actually worked. And it's like, what about all the ones that were scams that rugged us and took all of our money? Let's go after those and give the money back to the people on those and let the ones that actually did something continue. That's my opinion. Well, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a SEC person either.
We're never going to be able to make sense out of things that don't make sense, right? Because the whole point is to protect investors. And
we slap the good stuff that's working, and then we ignore all the other stuff that's bad and actually hurting people, like meme coins and stuff that actually doesn't have any value or utility. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would argue that I don't think meme coins are hurting anybody. Like everybody knows it's a meme. Like nobody's buying dog Wi-Fi hat because they think that like.
It's a transfer of wealth, though. It's taking money from one person and distributing it to another person. That's all it does.
Yeah, but it's so obviously ridiculous that I don't think that anybody, really thinks it's going to go anywhere.
No, they all do.
To, like the millions of other tokens.
There's literally sites
in
that
an
are
industry that's fraud. I mean, those would be the last guys that would go after. Like, but whatever,
know, right? That's
In any
the
event,
irony of it.
guys,
That's the irony
I'm
of it.
scared I'm gonna like lose you again. So when I have like
Hey,
little bit of Wi-Fi left, I just want to thank you so much for bringing me on here.
Thank you for being on. What's the URL for DLT Law?
It's just dltlaw.io.
Perfect. So connect with Yitsy there. Follow him on Twitter. We'll have him back, and we'll get you on when you have a better connection too, and we'll be a little more prepared.
Please.
And it'll be I think it'll be great to connect. We're going to connect on some deals and things we discussed yesterday, and we'll bring Yitsy into the mix on more things and get his opinions on stuff. And but I appreciate your time, and I appreciate, I know it's now 9 o'clock at night for you. So thank you for being online with us. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Rankin, any last words?
No, be safe. Stay legal.
All right, guys.
Talk
Bye,
to
everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.